I'm Eddie.
When were you born?
1923.
When war broke out in 1939, what were you doing?
I was an engineer. I left school in 36, the end of 36. Left on the Friday, started work on the Monday into engineering, and then I've got a job at Castle Bromwich Aircraft Factory. They were just recruiting engineers, and in 1939 that's where I started work, and the beginning of 1940, of course, that was when it decided that they were going to make Spitfires there. And I was one of the small band of engineers that made and built the production line to make Spitfires. There were about 14 of us. My working week was 7 till 7, 7 days a week. That was normal. If the job needed to be finished, we just stayed there till it finished, because it was so important in those days that everything was done that should be done, you know. Don't forget, there was an awful lot of fear in people's eyes then because of the likelihood of us being invaded. But strangely enough, to overcome that was the determination that they weren't going to get here anyway, that we were not going to be beaten. So it was a strange feeling, but it was there, you know. And so then we started to make Spitfires. And unfortunately, I tried to join the Air Force several times during the following years, but of course they said because you're an engineer and where I was, they wouldn't let me.
In 2007, a historian wrote an article about the criticism of workers in Castle Bromwich. How do you react to that?
Well, he wasn't there in 1940, was he? Now, what you must remember is that Castle Bromwich was built to build cars. That's what the factory was built for initially, by Lord Nuffield, to build cars. So the management that was originally there was management who made cars, not aeroplanes, cars. And so they really hadn't got a clue on the necessity for real close workmanship on building aeroplanes. Whereabout you could, if you like, as an example, you could alter or with a car with a £1.5 hammer. But with an aircraft, you've got to be very, very, very precise. And so there was a mix-up. Because they were a management that made cars, they really hadn't got a clue how to treat the workers and the job that was needed to be done. And it wasn't until the Air Ministry decided to change it over and put people from Vickers Armstrong, the management from Vickers Armstrong, who were used to building aircraft, in charge, the problem ceased. It was as much the management that really hadn't got a clue. I mean, when you consider that the measurements in the, if you like, you take the wing for instance, and you've got the aileron and you've got the tailplanes. Now the moving parts that the aircraft uses to guide it wherever it wants to go, the tolerances on that was plus or minus 3 thousandths of an inch. You didn't build cars to those dimensions, and so that was where the problem arose. And the chap in 1907 that wrote that, he read it off somebody else that read it off somebody else. But actually, it was the management that were at fault because they really hadn't got a clue how to make aeroplanes. I was there. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that was the problem. Supermarine, who originally built the aircraft, built the Spitfire, the reason it came to Castle Bromwich was that the production line at Supermarine in Southampton just wasn't big enough. It wasn't capable of producing the number of aircraft that we required. And so that was why the empty factory at Castle Bromwich was taken over, because the workshops there were so vast that once we built the production line there, not only did we build the production line there, but we also went out on to several cities and towns around the country, building jigs to make small parts of the aircraft, which they were then brought back to Castle Bromwich, so that the production was as high as it could possibly be.
So it was a management's problem rather than a worker's problem?
Well, yes, I mean, you couldn't blame them, but they just hadn't got a clue how to, the precision type of work that is needed to build aircraft. And don't forget, you got an awful lot of women that were making these aircraft, but you got wives, you got daughters, you got mothers and so forth. They were the production teams, and so they had to be taught how to use a rivet gun and how to put the bits and pieces together. And this is where the government, where the management, they were a bit sloppy, really. But you can't be sloppy when you're building aeroplanes, not especially a Spitfire.
What jobs did you do at Castle Bromwich?
Well, I was a hands-on engineer. We made, let me put it this way, when they decided to change to Castle Bromwich from Supermarine, and we were told to build a production line, if you can imagine, there was no IT like there is today. All they had was a big pile of blueprints and a lot of metal in the workshop, in the metal stores. And so to the blueprints, we went to the stores, we got the metal out, we cut it, we shaped it, we designed it, built the jigs, installed the jigs. So that was how we made the production line, and I was one of the small band of engineers that did that. It was a case of engineering with your 10 fingers, because everything we had to machine everything, had to cut it to size, machine it, put it together. A production line is a set of jigs, because I don't know any other term, but that's what they were. They were a construction of which you built the wing inside that, and then when the wing was complete, you took it out, and so you had a line of jigs like that on the port side, and a line making starboard wings. You also had a set of jigs for making the leading edges. That's the front part of the wing, because that went into the wing jig, and then you built the wing up from there. And then you had fuselage jigs, you had tailplane jigs, you had engine mounting jigs. We had to make all those before we could start the production line. And so once you'd done that, and people made all the bits and pieces and so forth, then it was all assembled and all came together. But that's what production is.
Did you see the Spitfires flying, and how did you feel?
Well, the little hairs on the back of your neck came up, and you were very, very proud, because you know you'd done a good job. Because I don't recall any one of the aircraft that we made in Castle Bromwich not completing its test flight. And so we were very proud and thought, that's it. Now we've got those, they're never going to beat us. That was the feeling of everybody. And there was always a great big cheer went up when the Spitfires came over and so forth. Because don't forget, where Castle Vale is now was Castle Bromwich Aerodrome, which was the headquarters of 605 County of Warwick Squadron. And so we used to, once the aircraft were completed, we wheeled them across the Chester Road to the hangar at the bottom end of Castle Bromwich Aerodrome, and that's where the test pilots were, and they took the aircraft off and tested them and so forth. And so we were involved with aircraft all the time, you know. And also, don't forget, we built Lancasters at Castle Bromwich as well, the Lancaster bomber.
What was the Lancaster bomber?
Well, it was the most successful bomber that we had. It made raids all over the place. It was an incredibly safe aircraft, really, and what isn't generally known, because I'm ex-Royal Air Force, in Bomber Command alone we lost just short of 56,000 young men in Bomber Command. A lot of them were now Lancasters. In the early days, of course, it was Wellingtons, but when we started building Lancaster, they were then taken out of operations. But they were a very successful aircraft, was the Lancaster bomber, made at Castle Bromwich.
Were you at Castle Bromwich all the way through the war?
Yes, yes. I was there right until 1945 when I had tried to get into the Royal Air Force several times, but they always turned me down and said that you were in a reserved occupation and that you were needed there more than in the Air Force. And so in 1945 I managed to get into the Royal Air Force. They accepted me then, and I served then for 25 years.
Was the factory bombed during the war?
Yes, yes, we had a couple of bombs, because the roof in Castle Bromwich was glass. It was built originally with glass, but of course there was no daylight come through because it was all painted with camouflage paint. So if you can imagine, to make production carry on as much as possible, we then, as engineers, we had to go in there and take out the machinery and to install it in another part of the factory. And if you can imagine that all we got on was a tin hat, and there was pieces of glass falling out the roof, and we were moving machinery from the parts that had been bombed to another workshop, you know. So it was a bit. We never really thought about it at the time until afterwards, and we thought, hell, bells, you know, that was a bit dangerous, wasn't it? But it was important to get the machinery out so the production could carry on and as little break as possible. We were also machine gunned as well on the forecourt. Used to get the odd bomber, the odd German come over in the daytime, and he would spray the factory with machine gun bullets, you know. My lady wife, who worked at Dunlop's, she nearly got killed. She was walking down the main drive, and this dilate bomber came over, and she just managed to nip inside into a workshop as he was spraying the drive with bullets. But of course, the daytime was all right because you got daylight. It was the night time that was a problem.
What was it like during the nighttime raid?
Frightening, in a word. If you can imagine that, say for instance, you heard the drone of the aircraft, and then all of a sudden you heard the scream of the bombs coming down, and they would go a distance away, and it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, getting nearer to you, and you wondered whether the last one was going to get to you or not, you know. But you soon got used to it. But then again, it was a case of we'd got to get on with the job, and which we did. Don't forget, it was black. Everywhere there was no light, not a glimmer of light anywhere. No street lights, no lights from houses or anything like that. And so, but it's amazing how quickly we got used to working and living in the dark, you know. Except, of course, when the fires were started because of the bombing, then it was a bit illuminated, you know. But in a word, it was a frightening time because you could do nothing, and you didn't know where or when the sticks of bombs are going to fall, because you didn't know you couldn't see the aircraft. You don't know where they were. You don't know which direction they were flying. You know, all you could hear was, as I say, the scream as the bombs started to come down, and then you hoped that the last one wasn't where you were.
What civil defence duties did you have?
Well, I was a messenger, and the job of a messenger was initially, immediately after the raid started, the telephone lines would go down, and so to get the emergency services, that's the police, the fire, rescue, ambulance, to places where they were needed. It was my job then to take a message from the air raid post. So the wardens used to parade the areas, and if there was an incident which required one of the three services, they would come back to the raid post and use the telephone. But as I say, the telephones invariably went down very, very early. And so it was then my job to take that to the report centre, which was, do you know where Stechford swimming baths are? Well, the report centre was about 100 feet underground there. And they could contact the emergency services by radio. So it was my job, on my bicycle, to take that report to the road, to the report centre, and then they would contact the necessary emergency services that was needed, you know. But and of course, I'd got to get the reports there, whatever. I was blown off my bike twice. The second time, I hit the curb with my tin hat on, fortunately head first, and put a bit of a crease down the centre of my tin hat, and I had a headache for about a month after that. But one of the funniest things, yeah, serious incidents, but at the end of the day, you got to laugh, you know. That was the only way we could get through it. And I remember I was taking a report directly to the ambulance service station. And all of a sudden, I'm cycling along there, and all of a sudden I saw this little white light dancing up and down. And as I got closer, it was a policeman. And of course, in those days, policemen wore capes. And he was all black. And in the blackout, it wasn't very obvious. And he stopped me and he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the ambulance depot. Got a report here." Oh, he said, "You can't go up there." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, we think there's a UXB, unexploded bomb." And I said, "Yeah, but this is important. There's a family trapped and they need to get to hospital." "All right," he said, "I'll tell you what you do. Pick your bike up and just tiptoe over the crossing, because that's where we think the bomb is." Well, when I got to the other side, I burst out laughing, because I then realised the funniness of what he'd said, you know. Yeah. But it turned out that it wasn't a UXB. It was just a heavy piece of shrapnel that had fallen down. But he thought it was a UXB.
Where was your nearest public shelter?
It was at the crossroads of Belcher's Lane and Cotter's Lane. There was a nice big green area in front of the houses there, and so they dug a public shelter there. So that, as I say, a lot of the people that live around there could use it, because their Anderson shelters weren't able to be used because they were waterlogged and so forth, you know. And so, and our air raid post was only a matter of a quarter of a mile away from there, so we used to look after them, you know, and make sure they got everything, and just give them a little bit of confidence and so forth, you know. Because sometimes, don't forget, we've been in there when the stickers come down and it's gone, and we had to cuddle the children, you know, because they were frightened. I mean, they make a loud bang when a bomb hits the floor, I'll tell you. A real loud bang. But the frightening part is the scream as it coming down. That's the bit that really used to frighten people. And so we used to go down there and cuddle the kiddies and whatnot, you know, and look after them and give them a kiss and make sure that they weren't so frightened that they, well, we used to make sure they weren't.
What was your air raid post like?
It was a room in an old house in Cotter's Lane. And it was just one room, that's all, which we did everything. Had to sleep if you could, or made the tea and so forth. But that's where the chief warden used to sit, and he was by the telephone. And of course, all the air raid wardens had a precinct to which they used to patrol, which was around Essendon Road, Allen Rock, Treeford Lane, Burney Lane. And they used to then, if they had a report, they would come back into the raid post. And as I say, that was the job of the chief warden. Then he would take all the details and phone it through, or if he couldn't, hand it to me. And I had to get it sorted, you know. It was, yeah, during a raid, I really didn't have time to be frightened. I was so flipping busy. I really didn't have time to be frightened. There was only one day that I had a reaction, and that was we'd had a very heavy raid, and I'd as I say, I'd been blown up on that occasion, but I wasn't hurt. But it had been such a terrific raid that night, and dawn was breaking, and it was a lovely sunny morning, and dawn was breaking, and I stood outside the raid post, breathing fresh air, and one of the lady wardens brought me a mug of tea. And as I took hold of it, all of a sudden the reaction went in, and I just couldn't hold the mug of tea. I was shaking like a leaf, and that's the only time throughout the whole of the war did I ever get a reaction. But it had been a hell of a night that night, I'll tell you, a real hell of a night.
What had happened that night?
Concentrated bombing in our part of Birmingham that night, and there'd been a lot of incidents. People were trapped, people needed to go to hospital and so forth, and so that was why it was such a hell of a night, you know. It was a very heavy, concentrated night. Normally it was spread a bit more over the city, but for some unknown reason, we had a hell of a night that night, you know, and there was very little space of time when you didn't hear a bomb explosion going off and so forth. Well, I remember talking about that. There was another messenger and myself, and it was a lull, and we were having a walk round and so forth, and we heard this dog barking, and so we went to investigate by following where the loudness of the dog barking was, and we came across this house. The house next door had been blitzed, and this one had been damaged, and the people had taken shelter under the stairs, which was not uncommon in those days. And part of the stairs and the wall and so forth had slid down, and a part of the beam of the stairs, it was an Alsatian dog, and each started to come out, and it had fallen down and trapped across his back and trapped in there. And of course he was in pain and he was howling. and as we tried to move some of the debris to get these people out, the dog was biting us. So, unfortunately, and I don't like saying this, and it was a terrible thing we had to do. Well, my mate attracted his attention, and I had to smash the dog on the head with a brick so we could get him out of the way, so we could get the people out, because they were injured, they needed to go to hospital. So it was incidents like that, which was, we didn't laugh about those sort of incidents, I'll tell you. That was a bad night, it really was.
My teacher says you're being too modest. You had a letter commending you of your bravery. What was that like?
You mean this one? You mean that one, Doug? I can't remember the dates because I'm too old now.
I'm going to ask my friend Annalise to read this out to you.
Dear Mr. Fox, it has been brought to my notice that on the 9th/10th of April 1941, during an air raid on Birmingham, when the telephone system failed between the Warden's Post and the report centre, you, regardless of personal safety, carried many urgent messages in spite of the fact the high explosive and the incendiary bombs were dropping all around you. This is a short personal note to convey my appreciation of your courageous devotion to duty on this occasion and to thank you for your service rendered in the national cause. Yours faithfully, Lord Dudley, Regional Commissioner.
Well, he was the Queen's representative for the whole of Birmingham, and he was responsible for all the emergency services and all the operations that went on around the West Midlands, and he was in sole charge, and everybody was answerable to him. So he was the gaffer.
Eddie, can you tell me a little bit about your wife?
In the 30s, I was in the Air Training Corps, and I was for 476 Squadron, Castle Bromwich, and I was the drill instructor for the squadron. And then one day, our gaffer, the CO, said to me, they are starting up a Women's Junior Air Corps at Stedford Road Schools, and they want somebody to teach them drill. Will you go along there? So I went along there. Now all you young ladies, you're going to think this is funny. I'm trying to teach them drill. And every time they make a mistake, they stand there giggling and whatnot, and they were really getting up my nose, I'll tell you. I was really getting flipping angry. Until all of a sudden, this one girl, she had the most lovable giggle you ever heard. And I suddenly realised I fell in love with her. She was 16, I fell in love with my wife in early 1940 when she was 16. And I've loved her ever since, every day. But unfortunately, I lost my lady wife 7 years ago.
What was your wife's name?
My wife's name was Frances Mary. And she was a lovely lady, a real lovely lady. I'm afraid I get a bit full up every time I think about it, because I miss her every day.
When did your sight begin to deteriorate?
8 years ago, no, more than that, 10 years ago, when I started to, up to then I'd got 20/20 vision, or so I thought, and I've got a problem which it creeps up on, you know, and it got steadily worse, and then I realised about 5 years ago, I was driving, and things were then getting very, very nasty. And I was driving down this road on a bright sunny day, and all the trees were in leaf, and there was this big tree casting a big shadow over the road. And I drove into this shadow, and I didn't see this cyclist that was in there. And I said, that's it. And I went home, and I've never driven since. That was over nearly 6 years ago now. Because I would never have forgiven myself if I'd have caused somebody an accident. And so and it's getting steadily worse. I mean, looking at you, Doug, all I can see is an outline. I can't see anything else, you know.
Fortunate.
But I manage. You got to. Got to get on with life, haven't you? You know, what little bit I've got left.
What difficulties does it have when you have lack of vision?
Well, you can't see to do things like you would. For instance, if you reach out to pick a glass or a cup, when you've got good eyesight, you just go and pick it up. But with your eyesight diminishing, where you've got no central vision or very little central vision, your hand goes past it, or you just catch it with your fingers, you're not in the right place and you knock it over. So you have to gently slide your hand along wherever it is until you make sure you've got hold of it. All right, so you're pouring something. You have to, you pour it over the sink, because the law says that if you don't pour it over the sink, you're going to spill it. And so you get used to doing things like that. Peeling potatoes, you know the brown skin potatoes? I have to use those because I can't see. Because when I peel the skin off, at least I can then see where the lemon-coloured potato is. Whereas if I had ordinary clear skin potatoes, I don't know whether I've peeled them or not, you know. Because I do all my own cooking and washing and ironing and housework. Much slower than I used to, but I manage, you know. It's a case of you learn to adapt, to do things, you know. One of the big problems is, now I'm losing my hearing as well, is crossing roads. Because I can't see where the vehicles are coming in a distance, I have to stand on the curb and listen. And it's getting a bit naughty now because I can't always hear how near they are and how you know, because I can't. So, but you learn to put up with things, you have to, because otherwise you just sit in a chair and you waste away, and I ain't going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Eddie, it's been a privilege to be able to ask you questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to come here to talk to you young ladies and so forth. And I hope it's been interesting enough, or it might have been boring, I don't know, you know. But thank you very much.